posted the recordings from the past brown bags. We just haven't had a chance to get around to it. But our plan at some point is to post these online so that people who are unable to join can go back and watch them, or people who joined who just want to see it again because they had such a good time, they can feel free to go back and watch it. So with that, I am going to, I guess, did I forget anything, Patrick, on that intro, or does that kind of cover it all?
Yeah, no, I think you got it. Just and to reiterate, please feel free to raise your hand by clicking the hand symbol there or chatting. We'll monitor. We want, please, we want as much interaction as we can, and feel free. We want this is informal, and we want a lot of conversation, and so feel free to chime in, as we go.
Great. So with that, I'm going to give a short kind of update on the post-World War II, that is, historic districts in Indiana. So I am going to share my screen, so bear with me for a second. Okay, so we wanted to give you a brief update on this important issue. Some of this is going to be really similar to my presentation back in March at Road School. So, apologies if that, if some of this is a repeat, but we don't want you to think that we've forgotten about it, and we do really think it's an important issue. So I think it's worth kind of checking in about this. After I give this brief update, I really want to hear from everyone about your experiences, questions, comments, concerns. So just a really quick background, because I don't know, we might have people on the call who have different levels of familiarity with this issue. So back in 2018, the DHPA, that's the Division of Historic Preservation and Archaeology, released a new set of guidelines to evaluate post-war housing. And that kind of was contained, the technical term is a multiple property documentation form, which was entitled, quote, Residential Planning and Development in Indiana, 1940 to 1973. It's linked on our website. It's available elsewhere online, but we have it on our website. That might be the easiest way to get to it. So, as you'll know, as you might notice, it goes back to 1940. We use post-war as a shorthand, but technically it also includes wartime housing, for instance, as we'll see. So, just some basics. It's one of the first of its kind in the nation. So I would say Indiana is probably out front, is ahead of the curve, kind of on the eligibility of post-war neighborhoods. It covers residential construction only. We're not talking about commercial properties. It was approved by the keeper of the Register of the National Park Service, which gives it its seal of approval. INDOT and Federal Highway, we did not have a role in creating or approving the MPDF. We're here, we're sharing the message. We're trying to get information out about this issue because it's important, and we want to make sure people understand what's going on. But we're not the ones, making the call. So there might be some confusion about that because we're often the ones conveying the message. But DHPA is, created this document. And I don't know, there might be people from DHPA on the line, and they would be more than welcome to jump in at any time. We'd love to hear from them and for them to be part of the conversation. And if I say anything incorrect or you want to amend something that is said, please do. Okay. So the basic upshot, and I think a lot of you will know this already, but the MPDF increases the likelihood that the 106 process will identify historic districts And so that means the 106 process could take more time when you have these districts around. Section 4F can also come into play, which is very important because historic districts are 4F resources. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. For the most part, so far, I'd say, at least up till now, we've been able to avoid, worst case scenarios in terms of 4F uses, adverse effects, and et cetera. But, even when we are able to do that, it takes more time, and that means more money, and it also creates uncertainty about projects. So even on like minor projects, it's taking more time for us to look at these neighborhoods and say, oh no, this isn't historic. Previously, we probably wouldn't have needed to spend a lot of time. Also, I should say all of the images in this PowerPoint are from neighborhoods that have been determined eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. This one here was determined eligible as part of a project of the Clear Path Section 106 process. So, what's changed, or what's kind of newish about this is earlier this year, back before the pandemic, DHPA shared some results of a windshield survey that went along with the creation of MPDF with us. And it hasn't been shared publicly yet. They're working on that, as I understand it. Their final review is still underway, but the determinations of eligibility are set. So, in the chat for this meeting, I am going to share the list of neighborhoods that were determined eligible, along with a link to a typical Google Street View image. There's nothing special about the image that I've chosen in Google Street View. It's just within the district. The boundaries haven't been totally set yet, so it's just kind of tried to pick a spot in the middle of the district so that people can go around. You can go in Google Street View and go look at the different streets and get a sense of the type of neighborhoods that we're looking at. So what the windshield survey and the projects from the past year and a half or so kind of changed our understanding of SHPO's understanding of what was eligible under the MPDF. In the past, when we've presented on this in a number of different forums, in the past we were focusing on comparative analysis and making a reasonable and good faith effort. But because we thought, these neighborhoods are so common that it really takes something special to make them stand out amongst the kind of suburban landscape of the post-war era. But the takeaway from what our understanding of the windshield survey results really was, it's simpler than that, actually. It doesn't really need all of that kind of special, unique, something different about the neighborhood in order to be considered eligible. From their perspective, it's our understanding that a district is historic if it simply meets the traits of one of the 5 subtypes that are found within the MPDF and has integrity under Section 106, or under the National Register criteria. So those subtypes are World War II era development, transitional developments, tract developments, custom developments, and planned developments. And for more information, go to the MPDF and check it out. So here are some neighborhoods that I'll go through. This is Blackiston Heights and Clarksville. And I should say these neighborhoods that I'm going through right now are neighborhoods that, to be honest, we were surprised by when we learned that the HPA considered these neighborhoods to be historic. You know, quite frankly, we wouldn't have considered them historic because they didn't really have, you know, there wasn't something that stuck out to us. But that's our opinion, and DHPA obviously differed in that opinion, in their opinion, and they make the call. So the boundaries here, by the way, are preliminary, but they're just thrown up for reference. So Blackiston Heights and Clarksville was determined eligible under both A and C. It's a custom development. This is a quote from the windshield survey. It's a custom development as seen in its winding street pattern with cul-de-sacs that conforms to the rolling terrain. Here's some typical images of these of the houses in the neighborhood. So here's another one, Beechwood Manor in Clarksville. This was determined eligible under just criteria A for significance in community planning. This was of the transitional development subtype. And our opinion about this neighborhood was, you know, similar to Blackiston Heights in that we saw it as common, but, you know, DHPA's position is that it has a kind of, I think one thing that's important for them is an architectural cohesion to the neighborhoods. So if you have a cohesive kind of set of housing styles, and again, that maintain integrity is very important in this, that it's considered eligible. Here's one of two neighborhoods in Brownsburg that were covered. This is Murphy Meadows. It's a tract development. And again, this is eligible under just A for significance in community planning. Here's the other one in Brownsburg, Warnaday Heights. It's custom development. Eligible under A for community planning. I think for this one, one thing that DHPA said is, quote, its street grid is more tightly geometric than many neighborhoods of its type, and the developer's incorporation of sidewalks and rolled curbs provide a more finished appearance than, quote, rural lane neighborhoods. Typical houses. All right, so let me exit out of this. So I think with that, I'd like to throw it open to comments, questions, thoughts. I know that there are consultants out there who have dealt with these neighborhoods on projects over the past couple of years. I'd love to hear from them, or if there are people who are working on projects right now that involve them, or for people who are not familiar with this issue at all, love to hear their thoughts. So do we have anything in the chat or anything from the audience?
Linda?
Yeah.
Do you want to jump in, Linda?
Okay, so they've developed this list. Is this supposedly a comprehensive list throughout all of Indiana, or a sample of communities that they just decided? I mean, what are we dealing with here?
It is not a comprehensive list. It's a sampling of communities, definitely. It's just meant to be a kind of example of, you know, a variety of the different subtypes in Indiana. There will definitely, I think, I don't know, there might be a dozen neighborhoods on this list. There's going to be many more than that are ultimately determined eligible under the MPDA.
One thing I'm wondering is, how are they defining integrity? Because when it's still the whole as opposed to the individual homes, has that changed? Because you look at some of those homes and they obviously don't have integrity, and the contributing, non-contributing ratio may not be that great. So they're still continuing to look at the whole plan development. Has there been any movement on that?
I think that, okay, so I think the problem with this is that people look at these houses and have different opinions of what is high or low integrity. So let me answer your question. Yes, I think they're looking at the neighborhood as a whole,
Okay.
right? I mean, but from our perspective, one of the issues is because these are not very old resource properties, these houses, are less likely to have huge integrity issues than, say, an older house, So, but my understanding is that minor alterations are not going to make a house non-contributing. Is Shippo's opinion is that you'd have to have alteration, you have to have additions or some other change to the form of the house to really make it non-contributing. New windows, different siding, even sometimes filled in garages to have not made a property non-contributing in their eyes. So it would take something pretty significant. And is anyone else from CRO want to jump in and have anything to add to that integrity question?
Yeah, no, I think it's the neighborhood as a whole. Is it cohesive, and how well does it reflect that one of those types, the defined types? And yeah, so I think that's our bar. That's what we're really looking at. But I still think, when we talk about integrity, I think it's still going to be one of those case by case too, like how much is too much loss, and so there's not like a magic formula still, on that. Did you see and maybe we could talk about, maybe we could go on to this one too, this next question from Karen, to see how we talk about this, but did you see so anyway, so Karen asks, are we not going to pursue comparative analysis anymore in the HVRs? What is the status of that guidance? And that's tricky.
I don't know. Yeah, that's really tricky. I mean, I think it can still be beneficial.
It has a use.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think that we might have debates with Shippo as to the how deep you need to go in that comparative analysis, and what is, because in our mind previously we were kind of thinking, oh, well, you just kind of zoom out, and once you start encountering a bunch of similar neighborhoods, you can kind of take a step back and say, well, this is just similar to a bunch of other neighborhoods. But I think that, basically in Shippo's opinion, you would really have to, I think it's a higher threshold. In order to prove that it's not eligible, it takes work. It takes a lot more work, where we were kind of starting from a position of, you got to come up with something that makes it eligible rather than makes it not eligible. And I think I did try to share the document in the chat file there. I don't know if you'll be able to access it. If there's anyone if people have technical difficulties, we can also email that out. And again, at some point this will hopefully go up, will be public, and we can try to get it out one way or another, but it's in the chat. So.
All right, I'll jump in. Thanks, Anthony. That does make sense to kind of use that as making an argument against, as to make the argument for, it just meets that the eligibility and the type and what we were talking about before for the integrity, but against it, maybe using the comparative analysis. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Karen.
Hey, Anthony.
Yeah.
This is Kellen Alexander. SHPO also is very conservative about what could be used as a comparative
That's
neighborhood,
true.
though. So it's really, it needs to be within the same geographic location, almost within the same town for them to really think that it's comparative. And it needs to be from the same time period, and even from within the same social class in some cases.
That's a great point, Kellen. Yeah, that is really important because, for instance, Karen Wood, you did an HPR for a project and up in Noblesville, right, and compared it to a bunch of places, and we thought that was good. SHPO concurred with that recommendation of a neighborhood up there called Wellington Heights that it wasn't eligible. When we got the windshield survey and we're looking at neighborhoods in Brownsburg, we thought, well, we should compare it to other neighborhoods in the general area, in the suburb, in the western exurbs of Indianapolis. But SHPO's position in that case was really we had to limit our comparison to that very specific area of Brownsburg. We only compare it, the proper comparison was only within Brownsburg. And within Brownsburg, those neighborhoods are a lot more significant than if you were comparing it to, to the whole western half of Indianapolis suburbs.
Any other questions or comments or experiences anyone wants to share? Or tips? And I'll say too that this is one of, as you all know, this is one of those things that, still is a little bit squishy, and we just, come to us with any questions once you get a project that has these resources in your project area, and, so we can, CRO can help you try to make a plan for how to address those.
This is Bridget from LaPorte District. That list, without having looked at them, is that list of a dozen or so, is that compiled from throughout the state, meant to be a sampling of these throughout Indiana? And are those that they chose meant to be used as comparison neighborhoods when making a decision on others?
That's a good question. Those are good questions in general. I think it's a sampling. Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't, they're concentrated in around larger metro areas, because that's what the MPDF really focused on. But yes, there's neighborhoods from Evansville, from Northwest Indiana, from Terre Haute, Clarksville, etc. I think they can be used. I think they're more like guiding their examples more than maybe comparisons. Like when you sit down and write an evaluation, you might use that in your mind, but I don't think you would have to compare whatever neighborhood you're evaluating to neighborhoods within that local context. But if you happen to be evaluating a neighborhood in Brownsburg, for instance, then yes, if that's of a similar type, like Kellen said, then those would be good comparisons. Does that answer your question? I hope.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
And then the chat, Jessica asked, are there typical projects types where we are seeing these communities come into play. And I think the simple answer is, well, it could be any project that this could come into play. But really, we're only, we do have some discretion of how much work we put into evaluating these communities. So if we're doing a curb ramp project, at the edge of a district or a neighborhood, then, that evaluation is a desktop, through the PA. So it really depends. Our level of effort really is tiered on what potential impacts are. I know, Anthony, you worked on the clear path, when we add travel lanes or noise walls, or we're going to build trails. That's been other ones we've seen in historic, in potential historic districts and neighborhoods have been multi-use trails, paths. So that take trees and, take right away. So in those, we're gonna look deeper, but it can be any project, but we do tier it based on what potential impacts could be. Does that sound right?
That sounds exactly right. Yep, definitely.
All right. Well, feel free to chat more. We'll try to get to it, but we'll move on to our next topic, and then at the end, if it sounds good, if we have more interest, we can circle back. Does that sound good, Anthony?
Sounds good.
All right. So now we're gonna kind of segue into our minor projects PA. Talk about some issues. Talk about give just some background on it, and talk about some specific things that help us in preparing the determinations. And so Clint and Kellen will chime in here too in a minute. But before that, I want to give some background on what the PA is and what it does. So a lot of you are very familiar with it, but the minor projects PA is, I always like to say, it's like our cheat sheet, get out of jail free card. It gets you, gets you out of 106, full 106, if a project falls under the minor projects PA. And the minor projects PA is divided into two categories. You have category A, and these are the most minor projects, and these are usually repairs, upgrades. They're not really new elements necessarily. And so I think category A1 is like bridge deck overlays. So these are very simple projects. And these can be made without CRO involvement. We do not review category A projects. These can be, at the district level, these are just very minor projects. Category B, these are your more in-depth projects. They could have new elements. And this is where we see, curb ramps, signs, trails. And so these are the ones we take a look at. Some of these do require archaeology. Some do require field visits. So for example, on the above ground side, if you have curb ramp replacements or sidewalk work within a historic district, then a site visit is required to determine that there's no unusual features. So no brick sidewalks, no limestone, maybe some retaining walls that would be impacted. So that's sort of the things we're looking at before we determine that a project falls under the minor projects PA. Once we've determined that a project falls under the minor projects PA, under category B, we will do a determination form. We fill out the determination form, and we will send that back to the district if it came from the district or a consultant. And then that form will go into the CE document. Once that determination form is complete, 106 is done. And so, it's a great tool that we have to really not have to go through the full 106 for minor projects that are those kind of projects that typically do not affect historic properties. And so that's really that's really the rationale behind the minor projects PA. These are minor projects that we have found through many years of experience that are unlikely to impact historic properties adversely. So we do have discretion through the PA to determine what falls under the PA. So, we have the categories, and as some people and consultants have, pointed out or questioned, like, oh, this is vague in some areas or specific in, other areas. And we do realize that But you know, we do want to, you know, these take a long time to negotiate, and you know, as you know, each project can be a little different. There's always like a nuance or some new element that we haven't thought of before. So, you know, we do want to keep that in mind, and that it can evolve, and so we do update categories sometimes once we you know, recognize that there is an issue or something we should add. But when we look at a minor projects PA request from a consultant of the district, we do take a look at what has happened in that project area before. Do we know of any controversies? Do we know of special sensitivities in a project area? And so, you know, if there's public controversy or we know there's a lot of interest, that might, you know, make us think, let's go full 106. This is safer, you know. And so, and we can even take quasi approaches. So we've had projects that technically fall under category B1. So they're curb work, sidewalk work that occurred in Madison and then within the Madison National Historic Landmark District. So we've had several projects in Madison where they have a really involved, really passionate, you know, preservation community. And so rather than them first hearing about a project when the work is commencing, when there's construction work, and they're alarmed that, what are you doing in the landmark district? What are you doing here? We actually processed the project under the PA, but we sent all the consulting parties a notification that this was occurring. Here's what it was occurring, and the project details. So, you know, we can take, you know, different approaches to get to that end based on what our experience is with the project type and the location. A recent project we had, and this is Karen again. Karen, if you want to add anything, but we in the project area was a stone dam. And, you know, we weren't comfortable just processing it under the PA, knowing that there was a stone dam in the project area. And so we did run it by SHPO. SHPO's came back to us and said, you know, they didn't think without other features like a pump house or that related to the water retention feature, and it was a waterworks or reservoir, that it would not be eligible. It would not be an eligible resource. So we did. So we asked the consultants to prepare a National Register evaluation. We agreed, and that project will go under the MPPA. So that's one of those things. Give yourself time. Let us know if there's any features or anything that we need to consider. And, you know, we don't want to abuse going to the SHPO to ask their opinions on these, but on some of those unique cases, unique resources, we can have the flexibility to go to SHPO and ask them questions. Hey, what do you all think? Is this appropriate for us to process this under the MPPA? And so we do have some flexibility in that regard. So just keep that in mind, that if you have any questions or you're thinking of something or thinking there's a resource there that might not show up in an interim report or, you know, other resource or, you know, shard or anything, let us know, and we'll take a look. And the other thing, you know, we want to touch on too is all of the CRO staff can review minor project PA requests. And so we all have a little different perspectives, experience. And so we might have some, you know, some different information we are asking for or need or come back to you on. And, you know, we try to stay generally consistent, but do recognize that each one is different. And so although we try to be as consistent as we can, there might be some slight variations, nuances to each reviewer. So just keep that in mind, that we want to do the best thing for the project, but also, you know, the resources that might be in a project area. And Kellen, do you want to start talking about some more specific aspects of the PA?
Sure. All right. Make sure everything. Okay. Yeah. So recently we've had a couple of questions from consultants and district staff about. I'm going to talk about B9s first. Sorry. And So we just wanted to clarify when category A3 and when category B9 are applicable and in which circumstances, since we've had a couple of questions come through. So first, the major thing that determines whether it's category A or category B for small structure replacements is right of way. So if there's no wood, stone, or brick, if the project takes place in disturbed soils, or if it's within the existing right of way, and all of those things are in place, then we don't need to see it. It's category A. Now, if it's outside of right of way, that could mean that it's in undisturbed soils, which would automatically kick it into category B. We're not entirely sure though, so usually it needs to come to us anyway. Additionally, we want to make sure that the right of way that's being taken isn't being taken from historic properties. So something we'll look at. But if you have any questions, we're always more than welcome to answer those. So that's a quick and easy way to determine whether it's category B or category A for small structures. And additionally, just because it is a small structure is adjacent to a National Register listed or eligible property doesn't mean it has to go through full 106. We can process that through the MPPA now. We sort of edited that category, so just because it's adjacent to that doesn't mean that it necessarily has to go through full 106. So still send them to us and we'll tell you which way. The other stuff I have is about part 2 submissions for category B1s. We've gotten a lot of various results with that part 2 submission. So the first thing is, don't do any field work prior to us asking for your field work. Like Patrick said, we do have a lot of projects that we've had before, and so we might have actually already had a project in that same area. And that's why we want you guys to hold off until we ask for that project, for you to actually go out and complete the field work. Because you might not have to, because we might have already had a project there. And second thing, yeah, Anthony, do you have?
Sorry, I just want to jump in. There is an exception to that, Kellen, which is with LPA projects. So my stuff, you can go ahead and go out and do the field work, because the chances that we've had a project on a local city street are so much lower than an INDOT project, right? So state route, US route through a historic district, there's like a pretty decent chance that we've done field work in that area before. On an LPA project, so don't go out, submit it to us. But the LPA, you can go ahead. Now, if you want to submit section 1 to me, that's fine. Without having done field work, that's fine. But you can do that for an LPA project. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's an excellent point, Anthony. And I don't really deal with those so much anymore, so that's even better. Since Anthony took over the LPAs, we've kind of backed off on that. But then the second thing I wanted to hit is the GIS files. We really need those to be the entire project area. So this applies for all of the categories, not just B1s, but so if it's an HMA overlay, we want to see the HMA overlay area, not we like seeing every curb ramp because it allows us to make sure that we've checked all of those, but we really need the entire project area. So from project terminus to project terminus. And that goes with B9s, B2s, B3s. We need to make sure we're checking the entire project area for direct impacts. So if it's a small structure replacement, we don't just need the culvert, we need any right of way that's being taken. And that's more important for archaeology as well, because they need to make sure it's in disturbed soils or undisturbed soils. So again, just watch your shape files. Also, they do need to be polygons. We are still getting points and some lines. Now, again, with B1s, if you want to give us the curb ramps and you just want to do some points, we're not going to be upset about that, but that would be an additional shape file. We still need that polygon project area. So for part 2 submissions, For B1s, that's a QP has to go out. We do need the date of the field work, not the date that you're submitting the part 2 submission. We need the date that you actually went out. It's just part of our form that we fill in, and we actually do put that date into the MPPA form, so it's important for us. We'd also like to just quickly review what adjacent means in this situation. With B1s, we mean what is directly next to the work that will occur. So we're not looking down the road. We're not looking 2 houses over. We want to know specifically what will occur right next to the curb ramp or the sidewalk work. So you don't need to document notable or outstanding properties 2 or 3 houses down. It's just directly in front of them. Our other one, so on prompt 4 of the part 2 submission, we don't need a full evaluation, which again, wanted to remind everybody of that. We just need a brief description. So that's something like what the style of the property, maybe a brief description like how many stories, maybe the primary material, but that's about it. Unless it's a new resource that you think is potentially eligible, then give us a little bit more. But for the most part, it's just, the really quick stuff. When do you think it was built? What style is it? And then, or the IHSSI number, those types of things.
I just
And
want to
then,
interject real quick about
course,
when
Clint.
you mentioned about the right away and everything, that it's important for us to know that. David Moffett just chimed in to remind everybody that the shape files that's submitted need to include all new and temporary right away, because we do need to know what temporary right away will occur. It may not necessarily change anything, but we do need to note that and document it so that we can make sure that everything's kind of put back to the way it is.
Yes, excellent. Thank you, David and Clint. Clint is one of the other historians. He takes care of the eastern half of the state, and I have most of the western half of the state. And then, like we said, Anthony does the LPAs. Yeah, and in prompt 5, that deals with the unusual features that you guys find when you're out on field work. If there's something there, we really just note it, even if you don't think it's historic. Let us know that it's there. Like, so in that instance, we're thinking of non-modern or modern brick or stamped concrete or flower planters even, or lampposts. Let us know it's there. And then just tell us if you think it's contributing or non-contributing to the property or the district, so that we just know that you've noted it. Because we're looking at street views as well. And if we see something that you didn't mention, it just sends up a red flag, and then we have to go back to you guys and ask, well, what's this? Is it still there? Is the street view outdated and they've removed it? And that type of thing. So it just helps us clarify and keep having to go back to you and prolonging that review time for the MPPAs. So yeah. And then with prompt 7, we do need to, if something is there and it will be impacted, we need you to actually describe what the impacts to it are. So you can't just say that it's going to be impacted. We need to know how so. Will it be removed and replaced, or is it one of those non-contributing features that they plan on restoring at some point? Like, we just need to know that type of stuff. So it is important to go into that again. Otherwise, we're coming back to you and asking, well, what's going to happen here? Yeah. So I think that was most of what I had. Clint, did I skip anything?
No, I think you covered pretty much everything that we had discussed. Did anybody else here from CRO have anything that they feel they need to or could expand upon, or comments, concerns, questions? Okay.
Thank you, guys. I mean,
Yep.
I think, some of the, I really hope people are listening because, sometimes it seems maybe like it's a little nitpicky what we're asking here or there, but it really helps us process these things faster. Right, guys, I mean, like, the thing about especially with the curb ramps, is we want to make sure that we're not, make sure we're fulfilling all the requirements of the MPPA of 106, and we want to get them done within a reasonable amount of time because we don't want to hold things up. So in order to do that, we really want these submissions, I think, to check all the boxes. That's why we created the form, in order to get all the information we need, but not more information than we need.
I would like to point out, I'm sure everybody already knows this, but I'm going to reiterate here. If something's a little wonky or you have a question, you're not 100% sure what exactly we're looking for, never be afraid to get a hold of us. We'd be more than happy to chat about what it is we're looking for. So that door is always open, so to speak.
Thanks, Clint. Thanks, Kellen.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. Hey, Anthony, do you want to touch on bump outs?
Yeah, sure. So bump outs are a hot topic these days, it seems like. We've gotten some feedback, inquiries about bump outs, and our position generally has been that we cannot process bump outs within historic districts under the MPPA. Those require full 106, or the project needs to be modified to remove the bump outs within historic districts. It's our position that we can process bump outs outside of historic districts under the MPPA, or that are not adjacent to historic properties. We've received some inquiries about this because I think that there's a lot of the high level of interest, I know, amongst LPAs about, the safety benefits of bump outs. And we've had a number of projects that are safety projects dedicated to curb ramp reconstruction, pedestrian safety. And those projects are often on timelines and budgets that do not allow for full 106, to be honest. And what ends up happening is that those curb ramps get dropped from the project. So under, that level of interest from project sponsors, LPAs, we actually recently took this question to SHPO and asked whether there would be any way to create a set of conditions under which we could approve bump outs under the MPPA within historic districts. And what we got back was, SHPO considered the issue and gave us a very thoughtful response, which we appreciated. But the short answer is no. We can't do bump outs under the MPPA within historic districts. Those require Section 106 consultation, full 106, and particularly input from SHPO. And the reason for that basically is that SHPO sees bump outs as being potentially pretty big changes within historic districts, and that any conditions we could create would have to be so specific and complicated as to render the condition basically useless. So that's their position. And so, as Patrick said, the MPPA is a product of negotiation, and, we don't just write the rules ourselves. So that's where it stands right now. We'll be looking to maybe sharing some of the specific reasons on the listserv or some other public forum, or if you're interested in it, particularly send me an email and I can give you some of what SHPO said. but we wanted to get that word out because there's been some uncertainty about, whether bump outs could be processed under the MPPA within historic districts. The answer is no. So we've also had a couple questions, recent issues about realigning a roadway under the MPPA. So we've had projects where the road is being moved completely outside of its current path. And generally we consider that too much of a change and beyond, what a lay person would consider a road reconstruction to be, and that requires full section 106. Again, if it's being slightly shifted a few feet here, a few feet there, or widened, that's a different story. But if you're taking that road and it's going all the way outside of its current path, or you're moving a bridge all the way outside where it exists right now, then that's generally going to require full 106. We might explore in the future the creation of an MPPA category, but that's that's very preliminary. I don't know. We haven't discussed that with SHPO yet and what that would entail. One other issue, I've gotten a number of submittals to our office that involve new signs within historic districts. See category B2. Category B2 precludes new signs within historic districts under the MPPA. And sometimes that's a little bit, there might be room for interpretation. Maybe you're moving a sign like 10 feet here or there. We might not consider that a new sign. That could be considered an replacement of an existing sign. If you have questions about that, get in contact with us, but it's an important thing to remember because it could easily fly under the radar because it seems really minor. But new signs in historic districts can be an issue. Do we know, is Sean Miller on the line?
Hey, Anthony, I think Sean's still out, as far as I can tell. He's probably still moving stuff. So he's either in the office or at materials and tests somewhere. But I just wanted to jump in on a couple of things that Anthony mentioned. One about the signs and the alignment part of it. Yes, what Anthony said is true in general. However, we have had a couple of projects, and it really is project specific. So there's no general rule, but we have had a project in Knightstown where we did put new signs in where there were none before, and processed it under category B6. The SHPO was okay. We do need discussions with the SHPO on those. There was also another project where a county road was basically a county road met where it was meeting the state road. There were two locations on which that was happening, and they basically decided to cut off the connection of that county road to the state road and cul-de-sac it. And that project too kind of was cleared under category B6 after some discussion with the SHPO. And that was just very specific because it only affected one property, and there was nothing historic around. So it's not that it can't happen. So check with us is the main thing. If you think it could be minor, just double check. And we will check with the SHPO if we agree that we may be able to process it under the category B6, which is kind of a catch-all.
I will say though that yeah, absolutely, that's right. We have the B6 for use in special circumstances, but before everyone comes running to us with using B6 as a catch-all, I just want to caution, like we could go to SHPO all the time for B6, and we got to watch out for that because it does. And B6s also take a significant amount of coordination too. So, we have to use it judiciously.
Yes, that's absolutely true, and it's only applicable in some cases, very specific and very project specific. So,
And you would say we do maybe a handful a year of B6s? I mean, they're very rare, like, is that, do you all think, a handful?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's rare.
It's
but,
rare, and it's really unusual circumstances.
Or new project types we never thought of, or
Right.
nuance, or like, I think I did one time where it was we do have a category for railroad crossings, but this was installation of the junction houses, the metal houses you see. And so that wasn't necessarily spelled out in the PA, but we thought it's very minor and they're part of the infrastructure of a railroad. So that's an example I can think of where we went to SHPO and said, this is really unique. These are very minor. They really blend, they are part of, what you expect to find on a railroad corridor. And so we did process that under the B6. So that was just one example I can remember.
Yeah, I see your messages, Sam. That's funny. Any other questions or comments about that? Yeah.
Yeah, we did touch about it. I touched on it and Anthony touched on it too. It's like, if anyone has ideas for new categories or new language, please let us know. You as a qualified professional or a designer or a project manager, you see categories that we haven't thought of, or types or nuances or specific elements of a project, please let us know. These categories can be updated, but it does take time. We do work with SHPO closely on getting the language right. We don't want to make it so broad that the categories can be abused, but at the same time, we don't want to make it so specific that it rolls out, some nuances. So, but we're willing to update categories or add new ones if we need to, or we think there's enough of these type projects or situations that it would make it useful to do that. And so we're open to that. So please feel free to do that and reach out to us with ideas. And we would be happy to entertain it and discuss and see if it is something, SHPO and Federal Highway would be okay with adding or updating.
And I know one popular topic of interest is that we sometimes see is roundabouts. So, and whether there would be any chance. So roundabouts we cannot process under the MPPA. That is not going to happen right now and for the foreseeable future. They all require full 106 consultation. I guess in theory, we've gotten questions about that. In theory, whether we could create a new category for roundabouts, and in theory, I guess we could try. I wouldn't write it off completely, but to be completely honest, I don't know what other people's feelings about it are on this call, but I would be a little skeptical of being able to create workable conditions for SHPO that SHPO, us, and Federal Highway could all agree to. So maybe it's possible. I think that part of the problem with roundabouts is that they're just controversial in a sense that they inspire strong feelings, a lot more than curb ramps or other type of projects that we do. And so that's just going to be hard. And they also tend to create effects over a wider area. And that just makes it harder to process something under the MPPA without having an actual HPR, you know, that goes, and someone going out in the field, establishing an APE, all the things that are involved in 106.
Yeah, Dave, that's a good point about roundabouts almost always require additional right of way. So, and that is, we do think if we did have a roundabout category, it would probably be very limited and maybe not something we could apply very often or ever. But that's something we would consider, you know, if we felt like it would never get applied, then maybe it's not worth the effort, but it's something, you know, we could look at.
Now we do process projects that require additional right-of-way under the MPPA. So in theory, that alone wouldn't necessarily preclude the use of the MPPA. But,
yeah, and I think we've talked kind of internally, if we ever had a roundabout category, yeah, it would be maybe limited to like no structures in the project area. Right. Or some that can be demonstratively modern, you know, less than maybe 45 years old, or, you know, if you're in a all new suburban area or in a commercial area that's all modern, you know, maybe that's a circumstance that we could consider, you know, so. Any other thoughts or suggestions or comments about the PA? And feel free also to send us suggestions after the meeting, you know, whenever, you know, we're open to that. Anu, you had something to say? You might be on mute, Anu, maybe.
Sorry. Sorry about that. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to just put it out there. The question has come up a couple of times, and about right of way needed from within historic districts. If that's the case, it doesn't totally preclude it from the MPPA. We do have the 4F. We modified our 4F MOU recently. And that clarifies that, that, you know, as long as there is no adverse effects, we could use the de minimis 4F MOU and still maybe able to clear projects under the MPPA. I just kind of wanted to mention that because I think there's some confusion. So if you think it's a no adverse effect, and you just need some little right of way for putting in a curb ramp or, you know, whatever it is, we may still be able to process it under the MPPA fairly easily.
Yeah, that's a great point and a very useful tool that we now have. If a project otherwise meets the conditions of the MPPA, right? So it's to check all the boxes, and we're just talking about a sliver, because we were running into that problem, you know, and you know, you need a few inches off the back of the sidewalk for something, and it's just not. It seems very frustrating to have to not be able to meet the MPPA for that kind of thing. So now we have that tool. And Anu, I think you might have gotten cut off, so I just jumped in there, but if you want to jump back in, please do. Kellen, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate again, that's also why we need to know where the right-of-way will be taken from. So we can help determine if it does fall under that de minimis 4F or if it's a non-historic property. That right of way will be coming from. So in which case we don't have to worry about 4F.
Great point. I think that's the point I was kind of going to make. So Kellen, thank you.
And to Kirsten's comment about the DHPA document, we can email that, right, Anthony?
Yeah, yeah. We'll email it after the meeting to all the participants. And again, hopefully we can, that it's kind of like a holdover for right now, until the more detailed information gets, formally approved by DHPA staff. But we will, for now, email that list to everyone right after the meeting.
Anything else before we wrap up?
Now's your chance. I mean, it's funny because I feel like we get a lot of project-specific debates on what does or doesn't fit under the MPPA, right? So we do have an opportunity right now to, cover any ground. I see Mary maybe has her hand up. Mary, you want to jump in?
Sure, I'll just add on to the MPPA discussion a little bit. Most of the time, so I'm Mary Kennedy, Historic Bridge Specialist for Cultural Resources Office. And most of the time, historic bridges are not going to fall under the MPPA. We're going to follow the Historic Bridge PA. They're complex, complicated documents. But I will throw out there, we've had a handful that we have been able to process under the MPPA when the work is very minor in nature. For example, we had a rehab of a bridge, but it didn't include painting it just because the way INDOT handles contracts and projects. So the painting was coming like a year later under a separate contract. And everyone thought, my goodness, are we going to have to go through the whole Historic Bridge PA process again just to get this bridge painted, which requires a hearing and, all of that. When it was already rehabilitated, the paint color is going to be similar to what was out there. So we did process that through B6 of the MPPA. So, and sometimes there's just things where it's like a very minor repair type of action, really limited in scope. The impact is going to be very minimal to the bridge. But I just thought I'd throw that out there, that if you have something that's so minor like that, that you're thinking, my goodness, this is going to be a lot of work for a small amount of work to the bridge, get through the Historic Bridge PA, always feel free to shoot me an email, give me a call, and we can discuss it and see. Again, it's pretty rare, but sometimes it happens, and we just want to, use the best process possible. Sometimes that's the MPPA if it's very small in nature.
Kia?
Hey, thanks, Patrick. I just had a quick question about MPPA category B6. Do you guys have a preference on how that conversation goes? Would you rather us, if there are other categories of the MPPA that we think it falls under, but there's like one strange element, do you want us to go ahead and fill out the form and say, hey, we think this could be B6, here's the other categories it falls into? Should we ask the question first? Do you have a preference on how that works?
I think that filling out the form is definitely part of the process, because that'll give us all the information we need to start looking at the project. And then maybe what you can do is, fill out the form, fill out mention all the categories you think it fits. And then in the email submittal to us, raise a concern and say, I'm not sure about this one part of the project. It might not fit under one of the established categories. I'm not sure if B6 might be appropriate in this instance. To be honest, I would say that we generally want to reserve B6 for our own discretion. So rather than having people come to us with proposals for using B6, but it's one of the, it's kind of, it's almost like, when you see it kind of a thing with B6, but if you're like the situation that you're describing, Kia, where you have a project that almost, where most of all of it falls under the categories, and you have one weird thing, that sounds like maybe a good candidate for B6. But there's also instances where, that one weird thing we might consider so ancillary or so, beside the point that it's really kind of, encompassed within. Like if you have a road reconstruction, and maybe you're doing other little minor things, it's not necessarily, sometimes it's so minor and so that does not have any potential to impact anything, that we consider it to still meet the established categories. Is that, Patrick, I don't know if that really answered the question, but what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. And if you think there is some weird oddball thing about it, tell us when you submit it. Let us know. Hey, this is, I know this doesn't really fit under that. Let us know. Give us the heads up, and then we can, from there, that'll help us kind of gauge how to move forward with that, possibly as a B6.
Okay, thank you.
Dave?
Forgot to unmute. I just to reiterate something that Patrick said, not Anthony said. If you submit the documentation with the submission form, it also gives us a chance to kind of familiarize ourselves with the process instead of trying to give you information cold, so you get better information in the long run, even if it seems like doing extra work for no reason. That's all.
Yeah, good point.
Right, and we've designed section 1 of that form to be, relatively easy to complete. It does not require a qualified professional historian to complete that part of the form, or a qualified professional archaeologist to complete that part of the form. So it's something that, a project manager, LPA official, even, prime consultant could fill out, just to kind of, early on in the process to get a sense of, well, could this theoretically, fit under the MPPA? Now, if we, once we review it, we might come back and say, well, we need additional information, and we need the opinion of a qualified professional historian in this case. But we might not, and we might be able to say, no, there's no concerns here pretty early on in the process. Kyle asks about going back to the post-war historic districts. Can you comment on landscape integrity versus integrity of the homes? The comments that Anthony read from the windshield survey referenced street layouts, sidewalks, rolled curbs, etc. That's a great question. I don't know. I almost feel like, and again, it's hard for me because I can't, get in the mind of, I can only go off of what we've heard from SHPO in our experiences with them, right? But like my quick take on that would kind of be like, you start with the homes. You need integrity in the houses and that kind of architectural cohesion, or the sense that most of them are contributing, right? And if you have that, that's your baseline. And then, but those elements that you mentioned can be important. Rolled curbs, lack of sidewalks, common amenities can be very can be an important part of what makes the districts. Kyle, I think, am I remembering correctly, there was that community up north near Kokomo that had that pool or something, Patrick, you reviewed? And that was part of the significance of that neighborhood. Yeah, Kyle, go ahead.
Yeah, I've had a lake.
Right, yeah, that was just outside of Greentown there. There was a neighborhood pool. There was no sidewalks. The landscape seemed to be fairly cohesive throughout.
Yeah, and so that, and that can be an important part not only of the identification process, but also of the effects discussion, right? Especially if you're proposing to put in new sidewalks, new trails, and that kind of thing. And that kind of gets into territory that can become complicated pretty quickly. But that's a great point. about the landscape integrity. Definitely something worth remembering. Well, I think maybe last call for questions, comments. I think, Patrick, you mentioned in the chat that we are, as always, welcome we encourage you to submit suggestions for future topics, anything you want to hear about, speakers, and comments about this session too would be very helpful, right, Patrick?
Yep. Yes, for sure. And if you have an idea, we have a variety of disciplines represented that come to these brown bags, but if there's but I don't know how many engineers we have, so if there's a design aspects you just generally want to learn about, a lot of us are qualified professionals in history or archaeology, so there's the design aspects, engineering aspects we're not as comfortable with, of course. So if there's topic areas you think would help your job or help you understand how decisions are made, or with scoping or ADA compliance, why are we putting in curb ramps? Why do they have to be certain ways? Why do we have to put in the pedestrian poles in certain locations? So there's all kinds of things. If you have, like, in your job, you're thinking, I'd like to learn more about that, please let us know, and we'll reach out and try to get people who can give us some, join and talk about what they do and why things are certain ways sometimes, and why we're looking at things a certain way.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because, today, to be honest, I think we were this session was maybe a little more focused towards historians in the audience and the technical in the section 106 weeds, but we definitely want this to be a conversation going forward that a variety of people can participate in, and that we can also learn from, because I'd personally like to know more about scoping and ADA compliance myself. So
thank you everybody for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Yes, stay cool.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.